worried.
Well, I had my birthday in the hospital.
Yeah.
That's
we
not a good
heard.
way to celebrate, but we're
We
glad you're
heard.
better.
Well, the nurses were very kind. They bought all kinds
Can't
of
hear me
balloons
now.
and so forth.
Happened to the Rabbi.
You still can't hear me?
I think he had to relog in.
Yeah.
You can't
Probably
hear me?
the
Morning,
internet.
Benita.
Hi, Ellen.
Good morning, Si. We're glad you're back.
Good morning.
Yes.
And hi, Bernie. Hi, Ray. Benita.
There's the Rabbi. Okay.
Rabbi, you look stressed.
Yeah.
Oh, and he's frozen.
Oh,
That's why.
Rabbi, are you froze? I think you're frozen on the screen.
Could be the internet. He probably has cops like us.
His sound wasn't working before, but yeah, he's frozen in time.
Yep.
So here's
Hi,
the rain.
Rain.
Hi, Dee.
Morning, Lorraine.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Did I see Cyan here?
Yes,
Yes,
Si
he's
is
here.
back.
Oh,
Hey,
yay.
Si. Happy birthday
Hi.
to you.
Hey,
Hi, Si.
happy belated birthday to you.
Happy birthday.
Hi, Marcia.
So I want to be just like you when I get old.
Oh, the rabbi signed off. He's going to sign back in. Let's hope he gets his sound back.
Oh, is he still having computer problems?
Yeah.
He did before.
Oh, the rain just blacked out.
Hi, Miriam.
What happened
Good
there?
morning.
Good morning. I
Miriam,
happened.
how are you, Miriam? Can you hear us?
Hi,
Good
Miriam.
morning.
Good morning.
Birth to Miriam.
How you doing?
Oh, there she is. How are you doing?
We're here. That's a big good.
Oh, Ray.
Did everyone have a
This Sunday is
wonderful
klezmer.
last day?
Is anybody here going to the klezmer thing?
Oh, yeah.
I am.
Yes.
Me, yeah.
I'm directing traffic, so don't run me over.
Oh, my goodness. Can I have a whistle?
I'm
Pam, you
checking
better
I
be.
love klezmer.
We're
Pam, I
checking
hear
people in.
there are 100 people so far signed up.
That's
Oh,
no,
wow.
I spoke
Wow,
to Glenn. I
that's
don't
pretty
think
good.
so. I spoke to Glenn this morning and he said 76.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be.
They
Well, some
expect
people
100.
decide
They
at the last
expect 100.
minute. You know?
That's very
Yeah.
typical of our temple.
Yesterday, I had 2 calls at the temple reserving spots from people who are not members. They're not Jewish, but they saw it in the Independent yesterday.
Yay!
So
Hey.
Good.
Thank you, Marcia.
Yeah.
I
Thank you,
wasn't
Marcia.
sure if it was going to get into which independent. You know, I gave
And
them a list that I wanted, but
it
Yeah.
got into ours. The only thing it didn't say, I mean, it did say that the box office would open at 1:30 for people to come so that they could pay and be checked off
it
on
didn't
the
say that. It just
list.
said the box office will open at.
Right, and it did say COVID protocols would
So
be.
they're going to
fo-
space the seats out a little.
Yeah.
I also
Right,
have.
They've also asked that people wear masks if
I would hope so.
possible.
I have a suggestion. I mean, for those who are not members and don't know, is there a flyer you could hand out for junk in the trunk for those who don't know about it?
Well, the
Good
jump in
idea.
the truck is not until March.
Yeah.
It's not till March.
Yeah, but that's
Well,
only
okay, I
3
thought they
weeks
should know about
away.
it, you know?
It's
And-
Good
2.5
idea. I'll
weeks
call,
away.
Bobby, who is not Bobby, but Glenn Zelkin's in charge of that event, and I'll call him after this.
No, Judy Nykoff is.
No, Judy and Glenn.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
So
I'll
it's nice
call-
to put a flyer out. Who knows, you know?
There is a flyer, so all they have to do is print some copies.
Yes, that's Precisely.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I'll mention it. It's a good idea. Thank you, Babette.
I think Rabbi is having trouble reconnecting because he's not here yet.
Well, do you want us to do our prayer? Do we have that
We can
done?
go ahead and start with the blessings if you want. Again, just a reminder to mute yourselves if you're not speaking, and keep your video on so that we can see your smiling faces. Let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu v'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lazot divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who has sanctified us with your commandments, commanded us to engage in the words of Torah.
Amen.
Interesting parsha today. Talking about God and Moses.
And the golden calf.
Talking about God and Moses determining whether life is good or not. So,
Yeah.
here comes the rabbi.
Doing okay.
Here come the
There he
rabbi.
comes.
Hey, rabbi.
Hey.
You hear me?
Please,
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling a little bit better.
Good.
I'm sorry, a little bit more better.
I'm gonna
Um,
take that.
And how's Cy doing?
It'll be okay if we
Good,
just
good.
Back.
hear you perfectly fine.
Ray, mute yourself.
I just did.
Ray,
I did it already. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Okay, good morning, everybody. We are on the blessing before the prayers. Before
did
the-
it.
We just did that.
Oh,
What did you
okay.
say? Oh, Cy, glad to see you.
Oh, thank you, Babette.
yeah,
Let us begin with Torah study, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're on page 82,
Right.
and we're talking about Moses. So we're moving back from discussions of some of the liturgy to more of the dynamics, leadership dynamics, followership dynamics, people dynamics, all of that. So page 82, any comments about Moses before we start? I mean, we've talked about him extensively in various contexts over the past year or so, but this might be a good time to say just a couple of quick things about Moses as a person, as a leader, as a, yes, Pam.
just trying to.
I'd like to hear everyone during the course of our discussion to weigh in on whether the golden calf, etc., is God's fault or Moses's fault or something else.
God's fault or Moses' fault? I would think it's be Aaron's fault.
Oh, yes. Well, yes. That's a given.
But Aaron doesn't really get punished for it. I mean, there were people that got executed for much lesser things. So even in the Bible, it doesn't seem people are treated equally, So I guess that's a fact of life that we need to get used to. But it's still hard for me to get used to it. All right, anyone else? Riva.
Yeah, I thought the relationship between God and Moses in this text was particularly interesting when they're kind of negotiating. I thought it was different from anything I've read before.
Abraham negotiated with God. But if we try to negotiate with God, it usually doesn't succeed. God, if this appointment with the doctor goes better than I expect tomorrow, then I'll devote all my free time to helping underprivileged people and stuff like that. I don't think God takes us that seriously. Or if you are in the course on Thursdays, maybe God doesn't have the ability to control, the medical part of our lives, the physics and the biology and that sort of stuff. Maybe is just part of the laws of nature, quote unquote. And God says, well, offer, let's negotiate something I can actually do, or, so, all right, any other comments, Bernie? Yes, Miriam.
Miriam, you have to unmute.
Moses does negotiate, and in actuality, he does win, but he does a lot of negotiating. So I guess that's part of his leadership ability.
Okay, so part of his leadership ability is being able to negotiate. I mean, any leader has to negotiate, right? You're gonna come across people that don't like you, people that don't like your policies, people that want something else, and you can't take it too personally, even though you'd like to. And even though it may be intended personally, but you have to separate yourself from that. And you have to try to figure out, well, what's going to be a successful negotiating strategy here? And of course, it takes two to negotiate successfully, right? So if the other party doesn't want to negotiate or isn't able to negotiate, then there's no negotiation. But God and Moses are both mature people, would you say, or mature characters? And they both understand that negotiation is necessary. Pam, back to you. Sai.
I think there's a catch-22 situation, namely, God keeps threatening the Israelites that he is going to destroy them. But should he destroy them, then who is going to believe in him? Then he will be non-existent, inasmuch as they made him from the very, very beginning.
Right.
So if he destroys people who believe in him, he doesn't exist anymore. There's nobody to believe in him.
So it's a catch-22. God would like to destroy the Israelites because they're not doing what he wants, but he really can't. Because these are, this is his client group. And so God is stuck with them just as they're stuck with him. It's kind of, so, but it's not, doesn't sound like it's that really that enjoyable a relationship at this point. Then if they're stuck with each other, that's not, you don't really want a relationship with God where you're stuck with God and God's stuck with you. Bernie.
Wasn't God's threat that I'm going to dump you and find somebody else?
All right. God could try, but the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Moabites, these groups were, not necessarily ideal. I mean, if I was God, I wouldn't want to deal with any of those three tribes.
The Israelites weren't doing such a wonderful job either.
No, but the Moabites would be worse.
Could be.
Sounds like a bad marriage.
I wouldn't know, but yes, it definitely does. And at one point in the Midrash, God takes Mount Sinai and lifts it off the ground and holds it over the Israelites and said, if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to drop it on you. So on one hand, there's the element of consent. On the other hand, there's not so much consent. And well, we'll get into this as we go a little further, but any other final comments at the beginning, Babette?
Well, Moses, although he had good rapport with God and influence, but not with Aaron. Before he left to go, he didn't say, "Don't screw up." We're waiting for the Almighty to tell us what to do. Aaron doesn't doesn't think a little forward or doesn't hesitate to return to bad habits.
Right. Well, and I guess bad habits are easily returned to, right? I mean, if you're addicted to something and you stop, you have to constantly be vigilant to avoid falling back into your addiction, right?
But you have to believe that there's a better way ahead than to
Okay, yeah.
starving in the desert.
Okay, so starving in the desert doesn't appeal to you, Babette.
Never.
Is that worse than some other deaths? I'd rather starve in the desert than be tortured by the North Koreans.
You know, that's a purely hypothetical.
Okay, okay, Miriam. If you unmute, if not, then we'll just go on. Yeah,
Ray had her hand up first.
okay, Ray.
Well, it seems to me that these Jews putting up a golden god was a pretty good provocation. I don't blame God for being angry at that point.
But
No, I
in-
mean, no, okay, Miriam.
But in a way, Moses was gone a long, long time. And in reality, they didn't know what to do, so they went back to their old habits.
Mhm.
That's the way I see it.
You're right.
But is that something you're supposed to do? Ellen?
I have on page 79, this is before our reading, it talks about how the Levites came forward and God asked them and kill everybody who was disloyal. Is that not part of this?
Yeah, it's not part of our, direct discussion, arbitrarily divided, but it's part of the story, yes?
So it's not like really discussed that like all these people got killed because they weren't loyal.
Mhm.
And then there was a plague for
Right,
the people who did the golden calf.
right.
This is a very harsh treatment, considering, we're supposed to be special, right? So how do you think that the people reacted after that? It's like it's a fearful God now.
Right. This is one of the problems here, and this is one of the problems throughout this book of Exodus, that you have God behaving in a coercive manner, killing people and threatening to kill people and so forth. And so in modern religion, we tend to ignore that. We wouldn't pretend it's not there because we want to be scholarly. But although Thomas Jefferson, made his own Bible where he took out the parts he didn't like, and he just, it's one way of dealing with it. And then you could just leave in the parts where God is compassionate and caring and loving. And even if God judges, you could leave out the parts where, he asked the Levites to kill everybody bad, and then apparently they didn't kill enough people, so he then made a plague.
So is that why so many of us are Levites?
Well, it might be. I happen to be a Levite on my mother's side, and I'm a Cohen on my father's side, and the Cohenim come from the Levites, so I'm really Levite on both sides. So, but my ancestors were not part of this. I just want to make that clear. They were at a conference at this exact moment, so they didn't kill anybody. At least that's what my grandfather said. Yes, Bill.
Okay, I'm a little puzzled by Aaron's role. Moses is such a strong leader, and Aaron is supposed to be in charge of the religious practices, let's say. And
yes,
he seems to be sort of a non-entity. He doesn't resist the call for the golden calf.
Right.
You would expect him to be an inspiring character to lead the people to, value their religion, to be a religious leader, to inspire them. He just goes along. And that's kind of puzzling, why he doesn't react, why he doesn't resist, why he doesn't try to assume a strong leadership role.
Correct. I mean, I don't have a good answer to that, Bill. I would just say that this is not uncommon in leadership. If you look at strong leaders, good and bad, they generally don't spend a lot of time cultivating future leaders around them. Of course, that's one of the goals of leadership, is to try to, to nurture other leaders. One of the marks of a good congregation is that the current president is able to work with 3 or 4 other people who are going to become, the president in 2 years and in 4 years and in 6 years. So you don't have a good president for 2 years and then you're back to square one, and then there's nobody will take over, in the famous expression, of boards, who's going to be the next president. And then, that's what starts creating problems. But I think it's very common. And Moses, in his defense, I mean, he's really busy. He doesn't have time and he doesn't have the training. There was a course at NYU he didn't take on how to cultivate next generation leadership. So, he basically, he's got Aaron, his brother, his putative brother, and Aaron, as Bill describes, is not much of a leader. And that may be why they work well together. Moses is the leader and Aaron is the translator and maybe administrator and ritual director. If it was in our temple, he would be chair of the religious practices committee. And maybe you don't need a strong charismatic leader for that. But with Moses up on Mount Sinai and God busy dictating to Moses, Aaron had to show a little more leadership and he just couldn't. Sai.
I'm wondering that at this point in the history of the Jews, how deep the concept of monotheism was. This is only 40 years roughly after leaving Egypt. They had been, living with other kinds of gods. And now they have a new God. And are they used to this new God? Do they know anything about this new God? So that when Moses is gone and Aaron is in charge, they probably might be more familiar with the old God rather than the new one.
Very true. And it's not clear that the Israelites were monotheists at all at this point. Rather, they were practicing monolatry or henotheism, that they accepted this is the big God, or this is our God, or this is the most important God, but there are other gods. And so since the big God is away, talking to Moses, let's find, another God. And, but we're not talking directly about the golden calf today, but that's, of course, what was the golden calf, and is it an idol representing a god, or is it supposed to be God itself? That's a different question. Bernie.
Even in the 10 Commandments, it says that you shall have no other gods beside me, which suggests that the authors felt that there were other gods along, and as you said a minute ago, and our God was the chief.
Exactly, and that's not the way that we want to portray ourselves today. We were the original monotheists, but that process of developing monotheism took probably several hundred years. And Bernie points out one of the 10 Commandments where it seems to imply there were other gods accepted. Even in the Michamocha that we say every Friday night, it says, who is like you among the gods? And we still have that in our liturgy, you know, and but I don't think that's a bad thing. Religions are supposed to develop and mature. That's a good thing, you know, but don't tell the Orthodox that. Riva or Sai or Ellen or Marcia. Marcia's been very quiet, or Lorraine. Anyone? Okay, Steve or Dee? No, okay. Who'd like to read? We are on page 82 at the bottom right-hand corner. Moses protests on behalf of his people. Okay, Babette.
You have to unmute, Babette. Babette, you have to unmute.
Yes, I had to click it twice to do it. Okay. Imagine Moses carefully making his way down Mount Sinai, holding the heavy carved tablet of the Ten Commandments. Among the words inscribed on them are, "You shall have no other gods beside me. You shall not make for yourself a sculpted image." For 40 days and nights, he had been alone at the top of the mountain. Now, as he descended, God informs him that the Israelites have not only made a golden calf, but are worshiping it as their God. Before Moses has a chance to answer, God tells him that because the Israelites are a stubborn people, God will destroy them and create another people for Moses to lead. Moses, of course, could have accepted the offer. He had already experienced many unpleasant moments with the Israelites. They had complained about his leadership, about his lack of food and water in the desert. They had even accused him of liberating them from Egypt in order to let them die in the wilderness. Why not exchange the Israelites for another people?
Okay, stop there, Babette. Comments. That's a rhetorical question there at the end. Why not exchange the Israelites for another people? Of course, you know, you're not just supposed to dump people and start over again, but Dee.
The way I look at this, I believe, or my opinion, is that God wanted all this to happen to prepare for the Israelites to grow, to mature. I mean, they were slaves for 400 years, and yes, old habits die hard, and they went back to idolatry. But I have to think that God's hand was in all of this. So maybe he was behind all of this to make Moses a very strong leader and eventually lead the people to the promised land, where they all died off generations and they were ready maybe to grow up and become monotheistic and follow the ways of the Torah.
But Dee, you said that they're all going to die in the desert, so they're never going to get to the point where they're ready, right?
Not the first generation, they all died off.
But if I'm in the first generation, that's really all I can care about because, you know, I want to get to the promised land. I don't want to die in the desert.
Well, I think that they basically were very selfish people and they had no concept of what really they were in store for. And I think the examples had to be set for them in order for them to understand that this creator is very serious and expects them to do what they're supposed to do.
I don't think I could have coped with all of this. I'm a slave, I get liberated, and then I slowly start to realize that Moses really did take me out of slavery to make me die in the desert.
And all they did was complain.
Well, I would have complained too.
So would I, but it didn't change the mindset of the creator.
Yeah. And being in the desert, no showers, no restaurants, no internet, and no future. Marcia.
Well, I don't want you to think I'm not paying attention here. So,
We would never think that, Marcia.
so how far into the journey does this happen? How long?
Not very far.
Not very far.
No.
So I don't think a lot of these people were true believers at this point. I think they were waiting to be convinced.
Okay, is that a bad, are you saying that in a bad way, or do you know, is that just a fact?
I don't know if it's a fact, but it's not a good way. I mean, they're on for the journey. They wanted out of Egypt, but I'm not so sure they bought into this monotheism thing yet.
All right. I think Ellen and then Babette.
Do you think that this was an attempt on God's part to get people to follow Moses by making him their savior?
Oh, what do you think? Let me ask that question, everybody. So Ellen's question, is this God's attempt to help build up Moses as a leader, get the Israelites to respect him more and follow him more? Anyone want to comment? All right, maybe that question will come up in the course of the next few minutes. Babette.
Well, something comes to my mind with this that happened at Masada. You know, they were living up there for a couple of years and the Roman army was surrounding them. And I forgot, was it Herod who said, well, would you rather die as free men or live as slaves? And they all, except two, committed suicide.
That's a
Right.
famous story told by Josephus in his book, The Jewish War.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I love Josephus, but
I climbed Masada. I was there.
Don't take everything Josephus says too literally.
Well, he was Roman. He was really not, a part of the tribe.
Yeah, no, he was very loyal Jew to the end, even through all his divorces and the gossip columnists and everything. Josephus had quite a life, but he was a very loyal Jew in his own way. Miriam.
In reality, was it correct of God to do something like this? Because if he just decided to leave the Israelites, they would be in the desert by this time and no help. So the whole thing to me is incongruous. I mean, he wanted them out. He brought them out of the desert, but then he was about to just say, well, goodbye, guys. I'm out of here. And so, I don't quite understand the reason for all this anyway.
The reason for
God wanting to just leave the Israelites where they were alone.
You would have suggested that they should have been left somewhere else?
No, that they shouldn't have started in the first place. God should have left them alone if he was going to abandon them.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Pam?
Isn't the whole Exodus just a series of tests? I mean, my theory is God has managed the whole big picture of the Exodus, and he's given them opportunities to do the right thing and given them opportunities to do the wrong thing. And all of them are a series of tests where they are hopefully going to learn something from it and do better in the future.
Anybody want to? Okay, we got some responses here. Marcia, Bernie, and Riva.
So I felt the same way even about the plagues and, the Pharaoh and the plagues at that time. If God is supposed to be in charge, he's setting everybody up for these various tests and kind of not maybe even knows what the outcome is, but maybe he wants them to go through the test because that in itself is a learning process. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, Aaron was a wimp apparently,
Oh,
because he did
that's
nothing.
harsh.
What?
That's harsh. That's harsh.
I'm sorry, but he was a wimp, you know? So,
That's my
I mean, he was supposed to
ancestor.
be the guy in charge and he wasn't in charge. He just let the people do what they, unless he feared for his life. That's the only thing I can imagine.
That's my ancestor you're saying that about. But it's true. Bernie.
I have to agree with Pam. I had a colleague who claimed that if all of your experiments work, you don't learn anything. The only way you learn is by making mistakes.
I mean, God made a mistake.
No, the
No,
people
no,
made the
people.
mistakes. They had the tests and they failed.
Oh, so the Israelites have to learn through experience. All right,
Right.
there's Riva and then D.
Yeah, this reminds me of all of our, or certainly a lot of our ancestors who suffered to get us, to get their future generations to a better place. And I see this as an example of that process that's happened over a great many years.
Okay, D.
Well, I was going to remark that Reva just answered. I agree with Reva and Pam. As I said before, I think that they were being primed, and all of this was because God wanted to teach them, just the same way we had to go through our lessons of life by our choices and what our intentions were behind the choice. So.
Okay, so Sai, and then we're gonna go on.
I like to think that that man made God, and in so doing, he has the power to have God do what he wants God to do. And over the years, the various writers with different ideas have given God different rights, different powers, and has God move in the direction that the thinking was at any particular point in time. And it keeps changing, and it keeps changing from generation to generation. And we keep asking the question, what happened at the Holocaust? What happened then? These are things that happened because we decided what God can do and what he can't do.
But could it be that we really don't want a God that we see as a God that we created and we can manipulate, that really
right
deep down we yearn for a God that is more powerful than us?
Yeah, we can manipulate him rather than him manipulating us.
All right, but do you think that deep down we really yearn for a God that is more powerful than us, that we can't manipulate, or no?
I can't hear you, Rabbi.
Do you think deep down we really want an all-powerful God?
They may have wanted an all-powerful God at that point in time.
All right, Ellen, you agree with Sai?
I don't know.
All right, Riva?
I think that question of did man create God or did God create man is a question that has gone on for a long time and will probably continue to go on for a long time.
Oh, Riva, you're such a diplomat.
Right, Riva, you're right. That's the
Bernie, do you agree with Sai? Okay, so we've got our, humanists over there, Bernie and Sai. Marcia.
So if we agree with Sai, we're just basically negating all religions.
No, not really. You're just negating maybe what we could call supernatural religion. You're negating Orthodox.
Is Judaism a supernatural religion?
Well, I guess it depends what form of it.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's a form of talking the way Riva talks. It's I'm trying to saddle both ends and the middle all at the same time.
But it's saying that there is not really a God. If man created God.
No, well, you could have, there's all sorts of forms of God, but that are, God that is the still small voice within us, according to the prophets, or a God that is a rational, philosophic attribute like Maimonides. There's all sorts of different forms of God that is not an all-powerful God of the book of Exodus, but it is saying the book of Exodus is wrong, I guess.
Yeah, the whole story concept that goes on through the whole thing.
But if you require us to believe in an all-powerful God of Exodus, I mean, I think only 20 or 25% of the temple is going to fit in that category. But I think you might fall in that 20%.
I'm not sure, but I don't like thinking that man created God in that form.
All right, Sai was a little bit blunt in his terminology. We're going to have Riva ghostwrite for Sai to put a little ambiguity into there. Sai just says what
when
he
you get to be 100, you get to say whatever you want.
Yeah, well, that is why the president passed over Sai to be the ambassador to Russia last month. He was he was a finalist, but in the end, the State Department vetoed it. They said you can't send Sai to Russia. Well, it could lead to a war. All right, who'd like to read?
Can I just ask
Sure.
one question?
Miriam.
If we say but we do say he is a benevolent God.
Right.
But he really is not a benevolent God. He
Not
does
always.
a lot of bad things.
You're starting to sound like Sai.
No, I don't feel like Sai. I don't. But the way we're talking, the way we're some are sort of denying God or man-made up the story about God. I feel where we are wrong is that we call him a benevolent God, and he really is not a benevolent God.
All right. And this is, this is directly what we're talking about on Thursday mornings in the course right now. How can there be a good God when there's so much evil in the world? And so, we won't recreate that course, but it's a big problem. Of course, it's probably the central, theological conundrum. Okay, who'd like to read? We're at the top of 83 on the left, despite the arguments.
What?
We're really focusing on Moses here today, although we've talked a lot about God. Who'd like to read?
Where are we? I would read a little bit.
Top of page 83, left side.
Okay.
Despite the arguments in favor.
Okay, I'll read. Before Moses has a chance to, is that the one?
No, two paragraphs down, despite the argument.
Despite, I didn't get that. Despite the arguments?
Yes.
All right, despite the arguments in favor of abandoning them, Moses surprisingly seeks to protect the Israelites from God's decision to destroy them. For centuries, Jewish interpreters of this Torah portion have been questioning the reason. Why does Moses choose to intervene and plead for the survival of those who are worshiping a golden calf? Among the early rabbis, there were those who believed that Moses defended his people because he was convinced that God's judgment was unfair. It was God, they explained, who had brought the Israelites to Egypt, where they had learned about idolatry. How? They imagined Moses asking, could God now blame them for worshiping a golden calf?
Okay, and I'm going to talk about this Friday night a little bit. So the question, the fact is that Moses defends the Israelites. He comes down from the mountain, he sees what's going on, he smashes the 10 commandments, but when God says, let's kill these people and start over, Moses said, no, you got to work with these people. And the question is, why? Theory one is that Moses feels God's at fault for having brought the Israelites to Egypt, and that was where they learned about idolatry in the first place. So you can't bring them to a place of idolatry and then blame them for becoming idolaters.
Correct.
So I guess, you convince your friend to come from New Jersey to Sun City because you say there's a great golf here, and then you criticize him for playing too much golf. You encouraged him to come here because there were golf courses. So what do you expect? Same here. Okay, comments. Do you think that this carries weight? I mean, idolatry in Egypt or not doesn't mean you have to partake, or do you? If you go to a good buffet restaurant in a fancy casino in Las Vegas,
There is no such thing.
and no, I've never been in Las Vegas, and they have this enormous buffet dessert bar. That doesn't mean you have to try one of each dessert, or really any dessert at all. Asai and then Marcia.
If you believe in God, the concept of God, then you believe in goodness and righteousness and everything that makes the world what it is. That God can't be wrong, because if he's wrong, how could he be a God? God is always right. That's what makes him a God. If he's wrong, he can't be God. Think about that. God is always right. If he's wrong, he cannot be God. He could be another human being.
Well, I guess it depends how you define God, right? If God is all omnipotent and omniscient, then God is perfect, right? And if you're going to go with Harold Kushner, God is not so perfect, not so all-powerful, not so,
Well, then is he God? If he's imperfect, is he God?
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with Harold Kushner, is by minimizing God, you minimize God, and then God's not really there anymore. Okay, Marcia.
So you have to roll the concept balance between God's omniscience and free will, because going to the fact of this uprising in the golden calf, basically, we're going back to Pam and the tests that she's saying keep happening during Exodus, right? So when those tests happen, the people do have free will. I mean, supposedly, there's God in the background pushing their free will. This is all kind of iffy, and going back to the Pharaoh, did God harden Pharaoh's heart? I mean, is God doing something to the people right now of Israel who are being led astray by their will to have another God better than the one they have, so.
Okay, Pam.
Yeah, but doesn't God says, I should destroy these people for doing this, but he doesn't say, I'm going to destroy these people.
Right. Okay.
So, and I think that's part of his message of, okay, this is sort of a warning, shape up or ship out. But so I don't know, I'm thinking that the God is, and I kind of agree with Sai says, God is, if he said, I'm going to, kill everybody, that would be one thing, but he doesn't. He says, I should do it, but I'm not going to.
Okay. And therefore, Pam, what is the kind of bottom line as a result of that?
Well, I mean, my personal theory on God is all powerful, and he sends us little messages through our lives of positive things that we should do, and gives us hints that maybe that wasn't a great idea of something that you did. So I mean, I think that's what's going on here in Exodus. He's telling them when they screw up, and he's telling them they can do better.
So when you buy that fancy sports car, on a Monday and Wednesday, a tree falls right on the roof of it and breaks part of the sports car. God is saying maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah, that could be one of the little messages.
Yeah, but a car is a thing, you know?
And it can be replaced, especially if you have good insurance.
Right.
And your insurance covers natural disasters, including acts of God.
Right.
And they call it acts of God.
Right.
All right, but we're worried about Moses here and why Moses. Okay,
Bless you.
any other comments?
bless you.
Marcia, and then we'll go on.
So Moses should be negotiating with the Russians right now, you're saying, because he seems to be the negotiator par excellence, okay? And so he has to appease God in some way.
The Secretary of State tried to hire Moses for this job, but Moses already works for the Israelis. Okay. Miriam, you want to keep reading? We're on
Yeah,
Rabbi
I'll keep
Huna.
reading.
Okay.
Rabbi Huna compared the situation to a father who opened a business for his son on a street filled with evildoers. When his son began acting unethically, the father became angry and threatened to punish him. A friend intervened and told the father, "You are as guilty as your son. Did you not place him on a street of evildoers, in a place where he could pick up bad habits? Did you not expect that the environment would have an influence upon him?"
All right. What do you say? So we're doubling down on this. Rabbi Huna is one of the sages from the Talmud. I don't know too much about him, but the story speaks for itself. I mean, you know, you all these athletes are doing steroids and drug enhancements, you know, so you should be surprised that the 15-year-old Russian girl that is the figure skater, and they found 3 hard drugs in her system. She said she shared a glass of water with her grandfather, and that's how she magically got all these drugs in her system. You know, do you blame her, or, you know, the fact that she's young, she's under 18, that, you know, that it's you're taking this precious lamb and putting her in with the wolves, the coaches, and the coaches are the wolves, and therefore you shouldn't be surprised what happens, and it's the wolves that are corrupting the lamb. I mean, you know, yes, Riva.
Yeah, I'm always glad that my ancestors got out of Eastern Europe. That's my comment on the Russians. But I was thinking
because otherwise Riva would be in the one on the figure skating in China right now. They'd be criticizing her that they have 6 drugs in her system.
Anyway, I think the discussion of the parallel between a parent and child and between God and the Israelites is really a very interesting one. And then who takes responsibility for what? And I'm reminded that when we're young children, we think our parents are the whole world and are perfect. And as we hit adolescence, we begin to see more and more flaws in the system. And so and who's responsible for what? The environment, the parents, whatever. So in that way, I find the discussion very, very interesting. You know, who is responsible for another person's behavior?
And the key point of today is that Moses is defending the Israelites, at least in part, and he's saying, God, it's not fair to totally blame them. But as Ellen pointed out, Moses doesn't stop the Levites from butchering a bunch of them, and he doesn't stop God from sending an early form of COVID to kill some of the others. So, but what he doesn't want is God just totally decimating all of the Israelites and starting over with another group. But he's still, there's plenty of punishment going around that Moses doesn't appear to object to too strongly. Okay, we're Rabbi Bill.
Yeah, also, I'm just wondering if some of these transgressions are sort of a prelude or lead into the Ten Commandments. Perhaps there weren't well-defined rules for the Jews up to this point, and that this becomes now a sort of a turning point. Now we have the Ten Commandments, and here are specifics that you should and should not do. And this might be sort of a lead-in for that.
Ah, very good. And it's a very direct lead-in, because when Moses comes down and sees the golden calf, what has he got in his hands?
The
Tablets.
Okay, the Ten Commandments. So
yeah.
the connection between what the Israelites are doing or not doing, or doing that's not good, and the giving of the commandments is a very direct one, as Bill suggests. And Moses becomes very angry, and he throws down the tablets, and they have to make another set of tablets. And the first set of tablets are put into the Aron in the tabernacle. So there's the broken set of 10 commandments are put in there along with the second set, and they're made differently. The second set are made with greater amount of participation from people. And the tabernacle is built with maximum participation of people, right? There's a huge fundraising effort. And so we're in the middle here in our temple in fundraising, right? We're trying to raise money to keep our temple going. But even if somebody came forward and said, I'll give you $100,000 or $250,000 or $1 million, that's not gonna, I mean, in some ways it'll solve our financial problems, but it won't be good. There's something that, you know, when everybody gives and everybody feels involved, and it also means everybody feels that their voice counts. And we solicited one woman, and she gave very generously, and she showed up like practically the next day with a laundry list of things she wanted handled, you know, because now she feels empowered. You know, I gave all this money, they better listen to me. You know, now she's not like, you have to do what I say, but you have to take what I say seriously. And if you don't do it, at least give a good answer. So there's a certain empowerment, a certain participation level, which I think is very healthy. And that you see here as well, that if God just makes the rules to Moses and everybody just has to follow, then there's a potential problem. And maybe that's part of what you're seeing happening. And maybe Moses is saying, you know, you can't kill the people, you have to consult with them. That you know, what's, you know, God, you're being too dictatorial, and that's part of the reason that the people aren't embracing, you know, monotheism or monolatry or whatever the form of religion was at that time. Okay, who'd like, Miriam, you keep going. We're at the top right-hand column of 83, in other words.
Do you want me to read?
Yes, thank you, Miriam.
Okay, the blame for bad habits. You want me to
No,
read that?
we can skip the box.
Okay,
That's a Brabanel. He basically says what
Yeah.
we've already said.
okay. In other words, Rabbi Huna believes that Moses interfered on Israel's behalf because he was convinced that their worshiping the golden calf was actually God's fault. The people had not chosen to live among idolaters in Egypt. God had placed them in an evil environment where they had learned bad habits. They were incapable of overcoming the condition in which they had been reared as children and survived as adults. Moses understood their burden, and according to Rabbi Huna, intervened to save the Israelites to prevent God from doing a great injustice.
All right. Same basic principle that we've already discussed. Keep going.
Okay. Modern author Elie Wiesel agrees with Rabbi Huna. He sees Moses as a brave defender of his people who argued, whose fault is it? God, theirs or yours? You let them live in exile among idol worshippers so long that they had been poisoned. Is it their fault that they are still addicted? Rizal also observes, in spite of his disappointments, in spite of his ordeals and the lack of gratitude he encountered, Moses never lost his faith in his people. Somehow, he found both the strength and the courage to remain on Israel's side and proclaim in honor and its right to live. Excusing the idolatry of the people of Israel because of their exposure to an evil environment, however, is not the only reason given for Moses' intervention on their behalf. The early rabbinic interpreters also pointed out that Moses was upset by the language God used when talking about the people of Israel. At other times, God had always referred to Israel as my people. Now, in announcing their punishment to Moses for making the golden calf, God called them your people, as if to imply that their evil doing was Moses' fault. When they were good, they belonged to God. But when they were bad, they were Moses' responsibility.
Ah, okay. I see Marcia is finding that very amusing. Bernie.
Your child that did that. It wasn't my kid who did this bad thing.
Bernie.
So what I see here is that this may be the first documented case of throwing somebody else under the bus.
Or under the chariot.
It's your people that are making all these problems. But isn't that a natural thing to take credit when things go well and to deny responsibility when things go bad? Dee or Riva or Benita or Babette or Diane or here Pam.
Our whole national government is based on that concept.
Yes. And it's amazing because we understand, especially in economic policy, and it's amazing that things don't completely collapse. Ellen.
I think we expect better from God.
And do we get it?
Well, if the Holocaust is any indication, no.
So the relations between God and the children of Israel is one of mutual disappointment, that the expectations are very high and the actual track record is rather low, and that both sides are really pretty disillusioned, but they can't really break the relationship because of the covenant. But it's not a totally successful covenant. Is that, I mean, Bill, Diane, do you agree with that, or you're totally the opposite direction?
Well, I have this problem again with this image of God. It makes him more human-like. It's an anthropomorphic vision of God. I wouldn't expect a God to have these little fits of pique that are described here.
So if we go back to Maimonides' concept of God, God is a rational philosophic force that's in the heavens, but God is beyond, these sorts of trivial back and forth, that to talk about God like he's a character in a off Broadway play is ridiculous. That God is the all-encompassing power of the universe, and maybe less personal than what we see here. Here, God is very involved personally, but certainly more grander and with more broader implications for things. Dee.
I have to go along with you, Bill. God is the author of everything in our universe, and I don't think the Creator spends that much time like we're reading in this. I think God is a form of energy, light, however different ways we look at the Creator or God, but I don't think God is going to punish directly anybody. I think that we punish ourselves, and that we are here for learning and understanding that we have to, have some principles and morals, and that is what our blueprint of life, the Torah, was given to us of humanity for. I don't think God is going to punish these people. I think that the people are punishing themselves by their acts.
Oh. So you don't think God ever punishes people, that they're always punishing themselves?
Yes, I don't think God punishes people.
Okay. Responses to that? Okay, back to you, Mary. Is Diane, is that a hand, or you're adjusting the cam? It's a hand.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, you want me to start reading?
Hold
No,
on.
unmute.
Oh,
No,
Bill, you have to unmute.
That's Diane.
I'm unmuted.
no, Bill, unmute.
There you
There
go.
you go.
Oh, are you
Diane
gonna
was saying something.
Okay, go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm trying. I think of God always as our parent, and I parent probably in a similar way. Not that I think of myself as God, but I always remember of thinking of my dad as Moses. Whenever he commanded anything, or I went, there's Moses, it's time to, straighten up. I've learned a lot over life, and I've learned a lot from God. And I don't know how to explain this. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to most people, my expectations and my thoughts of God. I've learned so much, and I appreciate God so much. And I do speak to God every day, and I get answers. God walks through my life all the time.
So getting back, Diane, to this issue here, do you think Moses is right to defend the children of Israel?
Yes.
And so how do you reconcile that with, but you don't want to blame God either?
Well, I think that if the people took the responsibility in their actions, and they have to pay the price. There's always a price to pay.
So the Israelites are at fault, not Moses and not God.
Right.
Okay. All right, Ray.
I always think of the fact that we have a chance to do better. God forgives us if we turn from bad ways and we turn to better ways. There's always a chance to turn. And I do think we make our own problems, and often have to straighten up, fly right, and start over again. I don't think this story is that unusual. And I think God is very patient with us.
So you're not blaming God. Are you blaming Moses or the children of Israel? Or is this just a bad situation that nobody's responsible for?
I think there had to be a lot of relearning and redoing to come from being a slave for 400 years. That's a number of generations. A lot has been lost, and now it has to be recovered. I think circumstances and the fear of Moses disappearing for 40 days.
He was busy. He was getting the 10 Commandments. He was talking to God.
Point. These people down below were left with egg on their face. Here I am. What am I going to do?
Should Moses have sent Aaron up to get the Torah and Moses stayed down with the children of Israel?
So I think this is a story of life in general.
Should Moses have stayed down with the children of Israel and sent Aaron or somebody else up to get the Torah?
I think Moses had the guts to stand up for these people and give them a chance to learn and become better Jews.
All right, but Moses is saying it's not really the children of Israel's fault. God, you have to understand they were subject to bad influences and you put them in that situation. Are you sympathetic to Moses's arguments, Ray?
I like his arguments, but I give him credit for having the guts to talk back to God in this way. Job did the same thing.
Okay, so you're comparing Moses here with Job. Job's, of course, tragedies were more personal, his family. Here, Moses' setbacks are more national, but there's an interesting comparison there.
These are lessons for us.
Okay, any other comments? If not, then we'll go back to Miriam and she can continue reading. Miriam, right-hand side, page 83.
Rabbi Barakiah quoted Rabbi Levi, compared the situation to a king who had a vineyard that he rented out to a grower. When the wine produced by the grapes of the vineyard was excellent, the king would proudly proclaim, "What fine wine my vineyard produces." When the wine was inferior, the king would blame the grower. "What terrible wine you produce." On hearing the criticism, the grower confronted the king and told him, "The vineyard is yours, whether it produces superior or inferior wine."
And that's when the king had the wine grower's head chopped off. And from that point on, it always produced inferior wines because there was no expert anymore. That's just a joke. Riva, Benita, Bernie, D, comments, Lorraine. Okay, Miriam, you can keep going.
Okay, Moses spoke out, explains Barakiah, because he felt he was being blamed unfairly for the evil behavior of the people. Barakiah imagines Moses complaining to God, "Ruler of the universe, you can't have it both ways. It cannot be that when they are good and follow all your commandments, they are your people. And when they are unfaithful and do not carry out your commandments, they are my people. They belong to both of us, and neither of us can abandon them."
All right.
Keep going.
Yeah.
As Rabbi Barakiah sees it, Moses is upset, not only with God's failure to take responsibility for Israel's building and worshiping an idol, but also for blaming him for their evil doing. Such blame is unjust. It is even a sign of disloyalty. How can you abandon that which you love? So Moses intervenes, protesting to God.
Okay, let's skip the box and go to the very bottom, Nechama
Okay,
Leibowitz.
Nehama Leibowitz points to another reason Moses chose to plead for the survival of the people of Israel rather than allow God to destroy them. It was a matter of God's reputation. Leibowitz reminds us that Moses challenged God with a warning. "Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that God delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth." According to Leibowitz, Moses feared that God's punishment of Israel, no matter how just, would be misinterpreted by the Egyptians and other people. They would conclude that that their idols were more loyal and generous than the unseen power of God, and it was dangerous to follow the God of Israel. Far from educating and promoting the cause of justice, Leibowitz comments God's destruction of Israel would bring the divine reputation into disgrace. That the cause of falsehood would be promoted and that of truth set back. For these reasons, Leibowitz explains, Moses decided to plead with God to forgive Israel rather than to punish the people for making and worshiping the golden calf.
Okay, thank you. Comments, Pam?
I don't understand Leibowitz here because the Egyptians are long gone. They're way back, many miles back. How can something that God does be misinterpreted by the Egyptians? And the Israelites are by themselves out in the middle of the desert. So what is Leibowitz worried about how something's going to be interpreted?
All right, well, in a broader sense, let's say the Americans would misinterpret it, the French, it doesn't matter, I guess the world, that God's reputation, according to Leibowitz, is now bound up with the success or failure of the children of Israel. And even though God may be angry with them, he can't just destroy them because it reflects badly on God. I guess the point Moses is making is, okay, maybe the children of Israel deserve to be destroyed, but your reputation is connected to theirs. You don't see that God can just start with another group and new reputation. All right, I can see Pam's point. Sai.
I'd like to get back to God directly. I think my question is, first of all, does God have a function? And if so, what is the function? And if he doesn't have a function, why do we have a God? And if he does have a function, has he been successful at doing what he's supposed to do? I think if we give that some thought, it gives us a better insight as to the whole purpose and thinking about who and what is God.
Okay. And therefore you would agree with Moses that God's reputation is connected to what happens to the children of Israel or not?
Yes. What does Moses see as God's function?
So God's function is to, among other things, to make sure the children of Israel do well. And so God has that obligation not to murder them all, but to encourage them, teach them, and maybe discipline them, but not kill them.
Yes.
All right. Ellen or Nan? Okay, Miriam or Marcia? Anyone? Okay. Yes, Diane. All right. You don't know how to unmute.
You're muted.
There's a little button on the corner where a little microphone with a slash through it, and you have to click once on that little microphone. Now, if God wanted to help Diane, could God help her in such a situation? And if not, will God punish Diane if she doesn't find that little thing to click?
It's red.
You might have to move your mouse to see it.
All right.
It's a red microphone.
Moses is saying, don't punish Diane for all the sins of the people. Okay. I'm just joking, Diane.
I think I did it. I think I
did it. Look at that. You see? Moses came to the rescue at the last minute.
I know. I have such a hard time. Maybe it's because I'm legally blind. I don't see well, and I cannot see anything on these computers. Anyway,
well, you did it, and even without Edda's help.
Yeah, and I just keep seeing the whole thing as life rolls out it's a pattern. We see it time and time again. It's family, it's patterns. It is, to me, this is all family. And we're being instructed, and we have this diligent leader who's the Moses of our lives. And maybe if we listened more closely, we get more messages. And as I said before, I really feel God's footsteps in my life multitudes of times.
So
I
Diane,
mean,
when you say that, does Moses have any role in that, or is your relationship
It's
with
God.
God by
It's God.
itself?
It's God, but I think that Moses as a leader, you know, was very, very important, just like our parent is our leader, our father is our leader, or our mother is our leader. It just, I keep seeing family. I know I'm redundant, but I keep seeing family, 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 and all that goes with it.
Okay, Steve, comment? Riva?
Yeah, with reference to Sai's question, he asked, what is God's function? And for me, reading this has a different purpose. The purpose for me of studying the Torah and learning this is, why is it worthwhile to learn what our ancestors said or believed or interpreted? I find that so valuable. It's not whether, you know, for me, the question is not what is God's function, it's what can we learn from our ancestors that is really precious.
I agree, Ruth.
And that's different than what we would do today in terms
Right.
of our own spiritual life.
Sure, and I think the process of thinking it through, and on the left-hand top side of page 85, I hope we have time to read that because I think it's
Okay,
beautifully
Riva, why don't
summarized.
you read it right now so we have time?
Sure.
We'll get it done right now.
You got it. Protecting others from harsh judgments by pleading their case, by urging an understanding of those pressures and conditions over which they may have little or no control is judged within Judaism as a high moral obligation. And then dropping down to the very last paragraph, Moses' intervention on behalf of his people is an ethical model worthy of imitation. Undoubtedly, that is why the Zohar praises him above all the heroes of the Torah as the faithful shepherd of Israel.
Uh-huh. So what do these two paragraphs mean?
I think that the importance of reading this material and getting some understanding of it reminds us that as Jews, we place a very high value on ethical conduct.
Absolutely.
And it provides nuances of what that, how to interpret that.
I agree with that.
And now, don't all religions place a high value on ethical conduct?
I haven't studied other religions very much. I think it's not unique to Judaism.
And don't all people, regardless of religion or not, place a high emphasis on ethical conduct, or maybe not?
Maybe, maybe not, but I think in the Torah, there are so many examples of thinking it through that are beautiful. Just the thought process and discussion is very, very useful to help us make good ethical decisions.
Riva, Ray.
A man named Buber wrote a book, I and Thou.
Right.
Put yourself into the other person's shoes before you judge them. And that's what this whole article that we have read today is. Put yourself in the other person's shoes before you judge them, and then help them go forward or realize that they can.
Absolutely, Ray. Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm repeating something that is told to us as Jews again and again. Don't judge
I
too.
agree.
D.
I love what Riva said. Thank you, Riva and Ray. I think exactly the same thing about this, that we should not, unless we're standing in somebody else's shoes, we shouldn't, or do we have the right to ever judge them?
That's true.
Mhm. So that's interesting, and it's interesting at the very end of our session, we're switching at least our tone from what we've talked about most of the session today. Interesting. Some final comments either about what the last two people have said or last three people have said, or earlier things. Pam.
This has really been a great discussion. This has been one of our best discussions.
Wow.
Good. It is
Bernie.
Not directly related to our discussion, but I stumbled on a Netflix documentary about two guys who present data that suggests that they believe that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia, not in the Sinai Desert.
We're planning a temple trip to Saudi Arabia next year, and we're going to climb Mount Sinai. You do not have to be a resident of Arizona to participate in the trip. So Ellen and Bernie are both eligible to come with us. You do have to have a license to drive a camel because we're going to be using camels for much of the trip. There is an upgrade option to a Tesla.
We're Tesla. God.
One hump or two humps?
The details will be in the travel brochure. I'm not really sure, Cy. But if you want the other kind of camel, there is an upgrade option, but importing the wrong kind of camel to Saudi Arabia might be very expensive.
In case you can't take the camel smell.
And if you're the only two-hump camel in the whole country, the other camels may be very unfriendly. Okay, I'll turn it over to Steve for the final blessing. Next week, we're turning yet again to a little bit of a different perspective. This is going to be about Shabbat. What is Shabbat? How is that talked about in the book of Exodus? And what does that mean for us today? Can we turn off our phones for 24, 25 hours? The answer is probably no. So how do you deal with a Shabbat in a modern world?
I have a question on that. Somewhere I read, it says Passover, Shavuot, and Shabbat. Doesn't Shabbat take precedence over all the other holidays?
Normally, yes.
So wouldn't that come first? Shouldn't they say Shabbat?
Yes, normally. Yeah.
Another thing, can a person get married, a Jewish person get married by a rabbi on Friday night, the Sabbath?
Not really.
Not really. All right. That's my answer. Okay.
I did a wedding on Friday afternoon a few weeks ago. And then I couldn't stay for the reception because we had services. And that's not a very traditional thing to do, but they did it. Riva, and then over to Steve.
Yeah, this week is the yahrzeit for my husband, and he loves studying Torah. And it never even occurred to me before knowing him that it might be worthwhile and meaningful to study. So I just want to say a thank you, of course, to my beloved late husband, but also to the rabbi who always brings so much knowledge and thought and diplomacy to this program, the Torah program, which for me is the most wonderful part of the temple activities. And then Lorraine, who absolutely pulled and dragged me into the temple. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
And all of us who participate in this, particularly Steve, who's been, I guess, running this for I don't know how long. But thank you for everybody for being involved and so committed to this study. It's just such a precious gift to each of us.
Thank you, Riva. That's very sweet and very heartfelt and very true. And Riva's relationship with Lorraine serves as sort of a model for how we we can bring people into our religion and our practice and our a discourse of disagreement, we could call it, where it's a deliberate culture of discourse, which is based upon argumentation, not in a bad way, but in a thoughtful way. And you saw here today, there's at least two very different viewpoints being expressed. When Steve started working with this group, it was before I was teaching it. Moses was teaching it at that time.
Well, I don't know about that. Let's put it this way. When we were holding Torah study at the in the conference room or boardroom at the temple, we had a limited amount of people. And now that we have gone through Zoom, we've encompassed, we had like 16 here at one time. And I really, really appreciate everyone's support and discussion. But anyway, just keep in mind also that Torah study is not just open to temple members. It's also open to anyone who wishes to participate. Okay, so encourage other people to join us if they want. Let's conclude with the final blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lan Torah met v'chai olam atah b'tokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah. Blessed is Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us a teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life. Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Have a great week, everyone, and hopefully see you Friday night and Sunday.
And book club, 2 o'clock on Zoom.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Joining us.
Bye.
Bye.